Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. Hot for Teacher. This is episode number 10. Nice round number. Episode number 10. If we were an HBO TV show, this would be the end of the first season. Thank you for coming and welcome. It's been a hot minute. It's been a hot minute since we did an episode. I've had a lot of stuff going on, which obviously true of my life at all times. But Hot for Teacher takes a special type of energy that has been hard for me to gather up lately. So I'm really happy to be back. I'm happy to be back to answer your relationship questions, which is what this whole thing is about, right? Hot for Teacher is a write-in advice show predominantly about relationships. It's a spin-off from this is the Frasier to the Cheers that is Office Hours. Office Hours being a GM tabletop role-playing game advice show. But we decided to get a little more specific. And we're going to be answering questions about relationships. And these questions come from you. I mean, maybe not you specifically, but you generally as a singular entity, my audience. You submit questions, and you can do that on my website, www.adam-koval.com/hot-for-teacher. And you can ask me questions about friendship, about love, about sex, about relationships of any sort, and I'll try to answer them here in the channel. Now, an hour is not a long time to talk about relationships, and what I would like from you, consider this your homework from Teacher Adam. Consider this your homework. I would like you to talk about the things that we talk about today in Hot for Teacher with your friends. Maybe there'll be something that comes up today that you're like, that's an interesting point. Or maybe you'll be like, damn, Adam, you're so insightful. Or maybe you'll be like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. All of those are appropriate responses. So talk about these things. Engage in conversation. Have a dialectic with your friends and loved ones about your relationship with them and about your relationships with each other, because talking about things is how we get to truth, right? And truth is important. And truth is a thing that can be elusive. So find out what your friends and loved ones think about their relationships. Carry on the conversation. That is my hope. That is my hope for you. Let's answer some questions. I'm burning for it. Let's do it. Let's answer some questions. Our first question comes to us from longtime Math Squad community member and a friend of mine. This question comes from Keeters. Keeters asks, after getting out of a serious relationship, I've been trying to find more casual partners, but I'm having trouble finding people outside of the binary of either just hooking up for sex or wanting something long-term. In all honesty, I'm just looking for friends that are down to cuddle. I love a person who's DTC. You got to find those friends who are DTC. That's some good stuff. And maybe smooch occasionally. Who doesn't like a good smooching? It's okay if you don't like a good smooching or any kind of smooching at all. Do you have any advice on negotiating that kind of relationship with people? Also, I just don't know what to call it. Like, it's kind of romantic and platonic and a little sexual all in one. Labels are weird. Hi, Keeters. Hello. Thank you for submitting your question. Now, I know, Keeters, that you submitted this question some time ago. This is the strange atemporality of the show and how it works. And that sometimes people are like, I just got out of a relationship in August. So whether you are just coming out of a relationship or you haven't been in one in ages or you're in one now and you need a change, this urge to do things a different way can arise. I think, and it seems to me, that it's pretty normal to want to go at things a different way after you're used to them being the one way, right? Often we'll get out of relationships and we'll desire not even so much a new relationship, we'll desire a difference. We'll desire something new. I definitely feel that. Because I think the alternative is doing the same shit over and over, which I guess can be fun if it works for you too, but that's not really what Keeter's question is about. if we look at the cultural narrative, which is to say the way that relationships are supposed to go, I use quotes because supposed to is the culturally reinforced way that relationships tend to operate, as reinforced by media and by our own stories we tell about relationships to each other. This cultural narrative of relationships that's often presented to us, and your cultural agenda might be different, right? Take note of where it's different. It's important to get a handle on this stuff. We tend to see that the relationship flow goes singleness, right? And then casual dating, and then finding someone specific that we really like the best, then getting serious with them, which might mean cohabitating with them or integrating them into a more intimate life space. And then you either get married to them, or you at least plan to get married to them, or you break up and you go back to singleness. And during the breakup, we tend to have this acceptable period. There's a kind of relationship rumspringa. If you don't know what a rumspringa is, look it up. It's an amazing facet of... Anyway, whatever. After the breakup, we have this acceptable mourning period in which we're told that our previous partner was like a totally crap human and forget them and we're going to be better off. There are plenty of fish in the sea, yada, yada, yada. And then we get a chance to be a little bit wild and have an excuse to, you know, really just slut it up a bit. Just really slut around. Because that's what you're allowed to do, especially when you are newly single. There is this expectation of like, oh, just get out there and wear your high heels and have a good time. But then you're expected to get your ass back on that relationship horse and try to be serious. Except, in my mind, fuck all that. You can slut it up all day, every day if you want to. You can have casual, friendly, sexy times, newly single energy, and find deep, intimate connections with people at the same time. Entirely possible. Nuance and gradation, and I guess if it's the kind of relationship you want, degradation in relationship activity is yours for the seizing. And the false binary of casual fling or serious date can just pack its bags and fuck directly off. Right? You can put it up against the wall with all the other false binaries. The trick, as I think Keeters has surmised, is finding people who are down to buy in to whatever relationship type you're after. Now, I actually tend to get this sort of question from people who are looking to deviate from the monogamy normative space and try to do like a decoupled relationship thing. So what I want to do is start with Keeter's most salient point. And the thing that I think is the most interesting, and I named part of the episode after it, Keeter's most salient point here is that labels are weird. She has grasped a fundamental truth of taxonomy. Labels are weird. And I completely agree. I think that a lot of the time we use relationship labels, right? We label our relationships to flag both internally and externally a short form of what we're doing. So when we say what a relationship is with a label, we rely on cultural and social weight behind terminology like wife or boyfriend or dom to tell us what the relationship does or does not contain. It's a internal shorthand for the kinds of boundaries we might expect from each other in that relationship. Unfortunately, without negotiating the specifics, calling someone your boyfriend is like saying, I love Thai food, but forgetting to mention that you have a peanut and a seafood allergy. You're probably going to die. In the same way, a blind reliance on socially weighted terminology puts us on the heartbreak highway to Bummertown because we didn't think to have talks about consent and boundaries and the actual reality of our relationship. So even if you're not in deeply conflicted territory and you're happy that you've got a snuggle bear to your honey pie, you're going to run into trouble if you don't navigate consent. Which I think is what all this shit is about. Right? Being able to talk to people, to take the risk that is required to start normalizing conversations like, what feels good to you? And what kind of things do you want and like? And here are some things that are good for me. It's really about normalizing those kinds of conversations. And honestly, the friendships that I tend to have that have those conversations in them, I find them to be the most rewarding. And they tend to end up being with people who have a good concept of consent otherwise, right? People who come to the table with ideas of consent around, say, like, maybe they're people with sex work backgrounds. Maybe they have backgrounds in BDSM or in counseling or anything that gives you the opportunity to understand consent outside of a purely sexual context. And I think that's sort of the next wave of understanding consent, right? Is that when we figure out how to talk about what is and isn't okay for us and accept what is and isn't okay for other people in a sexual context, we're going to be able then to move on to a greater social context for consent. And ultimately, that's sort of what will replace, in my mind, this implied consent of labeling. So I have an assignment for you. Not just Keeters, but everybody. So for all of you, I have an assignment. I want you to find someone close to you, a friend, a family member, someone you trust and can talk to, and ask them how they feel about your relationship with them. Just check in with them, right? Talk about the stuff that you do together and ask if there's anything that you, as a group, the two of you, ask if there's anything that you could do better or differently. For people in the audience who are my friend, I am happy to be your test subject for that talk if you would like to reach out to me and ask about that. Reflect on that conversation that you have with them and with yourself and think about what felt weird to you in that conversation and what didn't. Not what was wrong, but where your social comfort stuff bumped up against the conversation. So the other reason that I think we use relationship labels is less important to Keeter's question. So sorry, Keeters, I'm gonna back burner your question for a second. But it's worth mentioning. The other reason we use relationship labels is to flag things, often romantic or sexual availability, to people outside the relationship. The way that we assert our relationships is, again, a shorthand for people to understand them. So if I say to you, this is Rudiger. Imagine there's a person here. I'm not just generating empty space. This is Rudiger. Rudiger's my boyfriend. You, like Keanu in The Matrix, are going to suffer from a sudden rush of cultural information downloading into your brain all at once, dumped there by your upbringing, by your culture, by the media you're exposed to. Suddenly, Rudiger becomes boyfriend Rudiger. You suddenly have all of this assumed context about our dear boy Rudiger because of those things. Now, you didn't ask me. You didn't ask Rudiger. This was not based on actual observation or information. This is cultural shorthand, which is useful, but we both have to be aware that it's not as useful or as informative as, for example, me introducing by saying, this is Rudiger. He loves painting, and we just got back from a trip to Dusseldorf. Now, you are not learning necessarily about how I relate to Rudiger, but it's a much more interesting introduction, isn't it? I try to introduce people, I try to talk about my relationships with people as humans. I'm not personally really into ownership language, right? I'm not personally anyone's boyfriend. I don't want to be anybody's partner. I guess I'm Twitch's partner, but that's different. I'm Adam, and I'm interesting, and I'm cool, and people have feelings about me that have nothing to do with whether or not I am someone's boyfriend. All that being said, it's okay to have labels. I mean, period. It's okay to have labels internally so long as you preface them with a conversation about what that label entails. For everyone else, you're saying one thing and you are letting them fill in the gaps with their own biases, wherever those biases come from. Caveat emptor. So all that aside, and back to your question, Keeters, is that I think the answer is treating people like people first, and activity partners second. Surround yourself with people who are cute and fun and interesting, and who you like being around, and who aren't boring or shitty, which I think is good advice for everyone. Everyone, do what I just told Keeters to do. But Keeters, you're going to need to learn to read a crowd, read a room, get to know the folks you're surrounding yourself with, and take that step to introduce conversations about interesting things like, I don't know, their feelings about relationships and about monogamy and about casual smooching, right? If you want to be around people where casual, organically developed, intentional relationships exist, you might have to be the person who takes that first step and says, hey, everybody who's hanging out here, drinking beers together, talking about stuff, what do we think about monogamy? What do we think about having friends that sometimes smooch each other, even though they might not be in a situation where they're in a relationship? What do we think about traditional relationship models? How do we feel about that, right? Inviting other people to share their feelings will let you get to know them. And then when someone looks at you like, well, Keeters, I think casual smooching is great. Sassy face, wink, wink. Let's get a beer sometime, right? This is about creating an environment in which you can learn things about people so that you may be able to learn which ones are good ones for you to smooch around with, right? Like, I think that a lot of people, it can be hard for people to have this conversation about specifics, right? If you're just like, yo, Rudiger, what do you want to, you got a good face. Let's smush faces. Rudiger might be like, I'm not comfortable having that conversation yet. But if Rudiger is part of a group of people who are all engaging in ideas and talking about this bullshit, that gives Rudiger the opportunity to warm up to the conversation. Also, don't hang out with squares. Squares are going to make this process more difficult. And I'm not saying you're not going to find somebody cute to smooch who only wants to talk about his mortgage or his crowd-funded car wash startup. That's possible. But that conversation is going to be easier to have in circles where people are already open to being outside the cultural narrative. I'm trying really hard not to like talk shit about squares, right? Like, you know, you can be a freak and still have an MBA, but the idea here is if you surround yourself with people who are already in non-normative spaces, it can make this conversation easier. This is easy mode. This is choosing easy mode on the difficulty slider of how to get smooched by non-monogamous people, right? So probably the queerer your social circles, the more likely these conversations are already going to come up. Some of the groundwork is already going to be laid. There's a joke in there. I'm not going to make it. But that's a huge generalization, right? I have known many an open-minded square, and I've known many a closed-minded weirdo, so your mileage may vary. The point here is you're going to have an easier time picking a rose in a flower garden than you are in a car park. You're going to have an easier time finding someone to make out with that's cool with non-monogamy if you are surrounded by cuties who are already in that space, right? I think normalizing the idea that we get to choose the ways we express our affection, the ways in which we engage each other in these relationships, and the kinds of relationships we have with one another is super important work, but it is work. And so often, queerer spaces are the ones that revolutionize normative space, right? Like, for example, watching the progress of the straight world around, say, non-monogamy as a thing, a lot of that early work was done by queer people, right? Introducing the concepts, talking about relationships in a way that is non-normative, because we already live in a space where just simply existing is a non-normative property. But that's work I really like. That's work I'm trying to do right now, right? You're seeing me do it. And I know that, Keeters, I know you can do this. So surround yourself with people who you like and trust and who you think are cute, and engage them mentally and emotionally, figure out their headspace, talk to them as people. Don't prioritize the smooching part. However, I think that you'll find that these kinds of conversations are a bit of they're an opportunity for you to feel out that stuff. And you can do it. There are people out there who are going to want to cuddle and smooch. There are people who are DTC, and you will find them, I promise. But here's the thing, right? Whether you choose to label your relationships or not, to come back to the label point, whether you choose to relationship label or not relationship label, you should be having conversations. Even the straightest, most monogamous, culturally reinforced relationships should still be having conversations about what those relationships entail and look like, right? Just because you play by the cultural narrative doesn't mean you get a pass on having conversations about consent and boundaries and what your relationship is about. And that's good, right? So let's forge our own way forward. And if we find our way to something strange and unique, great. And if we find our way back to culturally reinforced monogamy, that's okay too, right? I'm okay with whatever you want to do. I just want you to talk about it. So our second relationship question, our second question comes to us from Codin Reacher, who asks, what are your opinions on deep platonic relationships, e.g. friendship? I think maybe i.e. e.g. and I get, anyway. How do you think it may affect romantic relationships? This question is a little simple and there's a lot of layers I wanted to ask, but I'm simplifying it down to that one sentence. It's the core of what I want your opinion on. Thanks. So if you tuned in to episode 9, you know that I hate the idea of platonic relationships as a sort of like magical friendship that is somehow transcendent among all other kinds of relationships. But I do think that friendship is important. Like really solidly, hugely important. So I want to answer this as a separate thing. I want to talk about how fucking great having friends is. Just take a second. Just take one second and think about a friend. Just think about a friend. Think about a friend you like. Think about someone who is in your life who like makes you feel like life isn't a miserable, shitty ruin. Isn't that nice? Isn't it nice to have a friend? I think a lot of the time, for lots of different reasons, people can end up in this place where the only people they interact with regularly are their romantic partners, their coworkers, and their family. We have all either been or known this person, right? Where it's like, think about who you interact with. Insert if you are not, if you're not in a career space. Insert instead colleagues at school. But I think we've all been in that space where it's like, cool, all my friends are people I go to school with, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my cousins, and then my girlfriend, my boyfriend, whoever, right? And, you know, it can be nice to have a person in your life who feels solid and stable and who's in a position to know you really well, right? Often our romantic partner is someone like that. It's good to have a nice relationship with your coworkers and with your family, that, you know, a relationship that isn't a nightmare if you have and value those types of people in your life. I just think that if that's all we have, we miss out on a richness of companionship that we get from being friends with someone. When I think about friendship, I think about the people in my life that I feel seen by. I use that phrase a lot, right? I talk about feeling seen, not feeling invisible. It's like being understood, being acknowledged, having someone recognize you for you. And that, to me, is what friendship feels like. There are relationships that I have in which I feel distinctly that I am performing in, right? In which I'm a cultivated or tailored version of myself. There are relationships in which I feel guarded or distant. People with whom I'm acquainted, but because these relationships are new or infrequent or the intimacy of connection just isn't there, I don't feel that visibility. I don't feel that bidirectional seenness. But my friends, the people who are close and important to me, those are people that see me in both ways that I see myself and ways that that I may not, ways that I might miss seeing myself. And that kind of intimacy, I find, is built over time. It's built with shared activity. And maybe most importantly, it's built with intentional effort. I do not believe you become friends by accident. I do not think that's how friendship happens. I think familiarity happens by accident. I think that proximity can simulate friendship. But I do not think that true friendship, in the way that I'm describing it, is possible by accident. The friends that I know best, who are closest to me, we've made efforts to have conversations, to do things together, and we've generally put ourselves in a position to get to know one another. We've done that on purpose. They're not necessarily the people that I've known the longest or who have the most direct connection with me. Some of my closest friends I've only ever spent time with in person once or twice. They may be friends that haven't known each other. We haven't known each other that long. But for me, it's about that seeing and being seen. It's about the connection that's built up when a person feels comfortable enough to be vulnerable and to accept someone else's vulnerability. That's the one thing I think that everyone I consider a friend has in common. It's really hard for me to be honest and open in the same way with a stranger. that's the one thing, right? That visibility, and visibility requires vulnerability. But the thing about friendship is that everybody kind of tends to define it in a different way, right? Like, just like Keter's question, what I might call a friend, someone else might call an acquaintance or a best friend, right? We all have different language around expressing this stuff. What can make one person feel like they're a friend is going to be a nuanced and different experience from another person. For some folks, repeat exposure makes you feel like a friend, right? Familiarity and friendship can be very closely tied. For others, friendship is predicated on a lack of other things, right? For some people, if you have a romantic or sexy feeling for them, they may no longer feel like your friend. They may feel like something else. And I think that's fascinating. And it goes to show that it is worth thinking and talking about. For me, friendship and solidarity are incredibly closely linked. Being able to support and be supported by my friends is an act of significance, whether that's making time to be there when they need me, or encouraging them to do the things that they're nervous about, or just reinforcing to them that they're important and significant. This is something that I offer my friends. If you, listening to this, if you are someone I am friends with, you probably know that this is a way I show affection. By being supportive, by being reinforcing, by telling you, no, you are good. You are a good, interesting, cool person. And the world might feel like garbage, but like, I believe in you. That is a thing that I do for my friends. So what makes someone feel like a friend to you? Remember that friend I asked you to think about? Think about them again. Get your friend in your head. Think about their cute face, nice ways they make you feel about your friendship. What makes them feel like a friend to you? And in what ways do you and this person show your friendship to one another? What are the specific, concrete acts that the two of you perform to reinforce your friendship? Have you ever talked about that? I think a lot of the time that isn't something that we talk about. It might be a shared activity. It might be that you can only talk to this person about particular things. It might be that they're a great cheerleader for you. Maybe they reinforce you in ways no one else does. Maybe it's that you have a physical intimacy with this friend, right? Maybe they're one of the only people that you trust in your physical space. Maybe you've been through things together. Maybe you go to the same bar. Maybe you've worked with them forever and built up this extracurricular relationship as a result of that reinforced time. There's all kinds of ways to be friends with someone, which I think is so great. And one thing that for me feels really nice is learning that. Like, I love learning what reinforces friendship with someone. That is a really fun thing for me to do. And I think that the complexity of what is or isn't friendship makes it a thing that's often hard to pin down, you know? I think with dating or marriage or sex, it can be a lot easier to know what's going on because you're dating a person when you're going on dates. Now, what dates are is fuck if I know. But generally, you can agree you're going on dates. You're married because usually the state or your religion or your culture or your society acknowledges that you are, right? If you're not sure if you're having sex with someone or not, you may need to ask Reggie Watts for advice. Reggie Watts will help you with that. Friendship, though, is often a trickier thing to know about because it encompasses a huge swath of the interactivity spectrum with other humans. That can be hard to know what it actually is. Like, are you friends with all your Facebook friends? Capital F? Are you friends with your coworkers? When you introduce or talk about someone, do you say, "Oh, I was hanging out with my friend so-and-so"? Why? Why not? Is friend a stand-in for you? Or is it not? Right? Like, we use these words in a bunch of different ways. I'm personally a big fan of the term acquaintance. Now, I don't have a lot of friends, but I have a hell of a lot of acquaintances. And I think that what I ultimately care about most, when it comes down to it, is that at the end of my life, I'm going to be able to look back at the friendships I had. I'm going to value them not for their longevity, but for their context, right? People are fluid and they grow closer or they grow distant as time and circumstance change. And I think it's important to recognize that friendship matters most in the moment. And as far as the intersection of friendship and romance goes, I think for most people, they have a turbulent interaction. When in context to romance, we use kind of denigrating language, don't we? When we talk about our friends, like, this is my wife, Phil, but me and Julian are just friends. Merely friends. Simply friends. Only friends. There's a sort of assumed lesser quality that goes along with being friends when held up against a romantic potentia. At the same time, friendship is somehow supposed to be purer and more enduring. I feel like the whole narrative is just a confused one. We're supposed to be searching for the one, but also our friends are what really matters, and romantic partners will come and go, except for one. One of them will stay forever, but there's plenty of fish in the sea, but your friends are forever. I've never understood or bought into that relationship narrative, mostly because to me, it doesn't make any fucking sense. I think a lot of romantic relationships struggle with that. There are so many tropes that tie in to the weird tension of friendship intimacy versus romantic intimacy. The idea that a person and a friend who they could be potentially romantic or sexually interested in shouldn't be trusted together, for example. This comes up a lot. Right? Well, you're going on this work trip. Are there going to be women there in your hotel room with you? You're going to be fraternizing with a gender you might also want to sex at? How dare you? You are threatening our romantic whatever. It doesn't, there's tension there that I don't think needs to be. Because of the ideas of exclusivity and the way that we handle this stuff and the fact that most people don't talk about these things. There's also this idea that marriage changes our other relationships, like de facto, right? I'm married now, so I need to be able to purchase with good behavior a boys' night out, right? It's ludicrous. And not the good kind of ludicrous with the raps. It's the other kind, the bad kind of ludicrous, the one that doesn't make any sense. It's a lot of ridiculous baggage that I think comes along with the interaction of romance and friendship. So I think the thing to do is treat every relationship like a unique and special thing. Imagine, if you will, that every relationship you have is its own thing, that it is special, and that there is no other relationship like it. Imagine that were the case, because it is. So construct that unique and special thing according to the needs of the people doing the thing. Talk to your friends about friendship. What do you value in your friendship with them? What makes you happy? Talk to your romantic partners about your friends. Talk to your friends about your romantic partners. Friend your lovers and love your friends, right? Celebrate your relationships in ways that feel affirming and strengthening and reinforcing, and use those connections to one another to bolster your sense of your own place in the world. Your personal community is made up of the relationships that you have with all these people. They might have relationships with each other. You exist as part of a network. Celebrate that network. Buy into it. Tap into it. Talk, engage, have fun. Feel your feelings with your friends. Share them. Not treating any specific kind of relationship like it's special for what it is forces us to find reasons to treat people special. I think you'll find whether the content of your relationship is romantic, friendly, whatever, you're in these relationships for a reason, and that there's plenty to celebrate. In my experience, intimacy is intimacy. And whatever form it takes, it doesn't have to threaten or cajole or take up space to feel real. If your intimacy, whatever flavor it is, needs to do those things, if it needs to step on your other relationships to feel real, that's a warning sign to me. Sometimes romance can emerge from friendship. Sometimes romance dies away, and friendship is what's there afterwards. It's all just different kinds of intimacy, right? So our third question comes from a mysterious man who gave no name. And this mystery man asks, in an internet age, put on your mirror shades, kids, get on the information superhighway. In an internet age with a job that keeps me in my room, I find myself connecting to community members and other people that share online social circles. What are your thoughts on finding, not searching for, love or relationships on sites like Twitch or Steam, etc.? This isn't about harassing personalities or content creators because, lol, you're cute, but stumbling into a connection. This question brought to us from someone, a curious someone. So, in any venue where human beings interact, people are going to find connection on some level. Whether a more traditional venue like school or work, or a less traditional space like an online community, like say a squad that does math, people sharing ideas, people sharing thoughts, people sharing feelings in any meaningful, repeated way can develop relationships. I'm sure that you can think of people that you primarily or exclusively know on the internet. I certainly can. Many of my relationships, I would say at this point in my life, the lion's share of my relationships are from the internet. They originated in the fertile soil of the information superhighway. I'm like you, anonymous man. I spend a lot of time in the same physical space. I have become very accustomed with this lamp and with this mixer and with these books. I have spent so many hours in this room physically interacting with other humans via the internet. We're doing it right now in both my own community and in others, right? Most of the folks who are significant to me are people I know through online means. Other Twitch broadcasters, folks who are part of the same communities as I am, other game design folks, people that I do not co-locate with in any meaningful way. More than any other time in my adult life, the people I am emotionally closest to are the people who are physically furthest away from me. I think that if I didn't believe that relationships were possible over a physical distance, I would be a very bummed out dude right now. And I see people struggling with this. I really do. Like, I see people in my circles. I see other broadcasters. I see people in this space who are isolated physically, who have lower or higher physical needs for their socialization than I do. I can go 3 or 4 days only seeing people on the internet and not feel cabin fever or like wigged out about that. But there are people who feel like they're missing out. And that's okay. Everybody has a variety of needs. For me, this kind of space is fine. It feels good. I think for me, especially, the flip side of that isolation is actually really true. I feel very connected to the people that I'm close to. I feel like I'm able to communicate with them in ways I couldn't have before. And despite the distance, I feel both a deep sense of intimacy and connectedness. And I feel like I have more friends now than maybe I ever have in my life. And not just acquaintances, as we were talking about in the second question, but like real, true friends. Some of you are counted among that list. And I wouldn't have been in that position because I wouldn't have been in that position without the internet to do that for me. Now, part of that is being a naturally solitary person, tends to bond closely with a small number of people. I don't feel the need to be surrounded by humans. I don't feel the need to be in social situations with like a ton of other people. In fact, it kind of freaks me out. I tend to have close bonds that linger without a lot of work, right? Once I connect to a person, on my end, that connection tends to stay clear and solid without too much aggressive renewal. So when I get to see my friends 3 or 4 times in a whole year, it's okay because I can pop into their stream and I can watch them. I can play games with them. Playing role-playing games on the internet is a very reinforcing social behavior for me. I can interact in plenty of asynchronous ways that feel nice to me. Conventions are huge as a way to concentrate seeing my friends in a focused event. And honestly, that kind of intentionality really works for me. Long periods of distant connection, bursts of proximity. I feel like a comet making the rounds, right? And sometimes I will fly by planet Friendo and we'll get to hang out. But then I'm gonna slingshot out of their orbit and I'm gonna head off for another planet. It doesn't mean I don't love you anymore, Mars, but I'll be back. I'll be back. You know? That's how I socialize. So when I meet someone at a convention and we make a connection, I get excited for the next time I meet them, right? If I meet you, if we've interacted on the internet before and you come to the Burning Wheel booth, you got to tell me who you are. You got to tell me your username because I am so primed to meet you. I'm like, oh my God, we get this moment in real life. This is our comet moment before the two of us fly off into space. But it's a reinforcing activity for me. And I think that that's something that can be possible for other people too, if it works, right? Now, part of it is that I am privileged to have mobility, right? I'm able to drive to Seattle if I feel like it. I can fly to conventions. If there's a special reason to visit someone or I have a need, I can do that. I can make that happen. Now, not everybody can do that. So even if your needs might align with this style of occasional physical interactivity with your friends, you may not be able to because you may live in an isolated place. You may not be able to afford it, that kind of thing. But if you are someone I only see 2 or 3 times a year and we have a really nice time when we're together, I want you to know that I'm thankful for that. And you may have other friends who are in that position too. And it's okay. All of my reinforcing this as a personal thing, I'm trying to empathize with you to reinforce that it's okay to have relationships in that way. It's okay to feel like that. Just because you don't see your friends a lot doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. As far as specifically seeking and having romantic relationships via the internet, I mean, every relationship is about its contents, right? We've talked about this. No relationship is anything except what happens in the relationship. And if everyone involved can feel comfortable and fulfilled by the avenues of intimacy that is available to you, there's no reason to think that it's not possible to have that kind of relationship strictly via the internet. Now, I will say this. For me, personally, it is super nice to be able to hug people sometimes. I'm usually pretty firmly in the I could probably go forever without ever touching another human again, camp. But when I really think about it, sometimes my body and my brain don't agree on that. And it can be real nice to supplement a purely emotional or intellectual relationship with one where you get to do body stuff like hug or hold hands or do physical sex stuff, if that's what you're into and that's part of your relationship. Like all those things, not just the sex stuff. I have this experience where usually if someone asks me, so even a stranger, if someone asks me, can I hug you? My like response to that is so physically like exciting and nice. The fact that someone is willing to ask me for consent to hug me makes them like them enough to want to hug them. And I want to hug them for asking, right? I'm like, yes, we can hug because you asked me about, I like you. I like that you respect the bubble enough. Well, come into it. Right? It's weird. It's a weird thing, but it absolutely makes me immediately like want that thing more. And I understand my reaction and interaction with that stuff. I like being able to connect physically with people in a context that feels safe. So for me, it's nice to be able to get that, but I only need like, one hug per person every 4 or 5 months, basically. Here's the thing. If you are connecting with people in the space you have available to you, if you're making friends and you're feeling close to people in whatever venue that is happening in, you probably don't need to worry too much about it. If you're getting the good feelings. I know that a lot of people have a hard time just making friends at all. Online or off. Connecting with other people is hard, and count yourself lucky that you have found space to feel comfortable in. Do not judge that space. Don't doubt your relationships because they're just online, right? Treat the people and spaces that you have around you with respect. Let them be what they are. You might find that you are just as fulfilled as you would be with an in-person relationship. By the same token, don't assume you've got to be satisfied with what you have either. Be flexible. Listen to your own needs. Interrogate your relationships. Think about your desires. Think about your needs. Talk with other people about these things. It may be you'll have to make some time and energy in your life for more in-person, AFK type relationships, if that's what you need and desire, and let yourself change, right? In the end, it's about being aware of your own emotional response to things and being open to whatever your brain and heart tell you that you need. Listen to your feelings and then learn ways to talk about them and engage with them. Which I think, regardless of your circumstances, online or offline, I think is good advice for everybody. Listen to your feelings, kids. So I hope that today's episode has been interesting for you, thought-provoking, giving you some stuff to think about. This has been the 10th episode of Hot for Teacher, a write-in relationship advice show that's today all about friendship. Friends you can smooch. What is a friend? How do I internet friend? If you want to get involved, you can go to www.adam-koble.com. That's my website. And you click on the little Hot for Teacher link, type in your question, and I will try to get to answering your question on the air. Reasons that I may not answer your question, a very similar question has been asked. I've got a few that are overlaps. Or it may just take some time. There are a lot of questions. I'm still answering stuff from like September. So cool. Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope that you've had a nice time, and we will see you next time. Practice good relationships. Talk about your shit, everybody. Talk about it, or I'll be mad, but not really. Take care of yourselves. See you next time.